Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of Heritage Oakville to order. It's a live meeting again, and we're back in the council chamber again. Can't say I prefer to be here than our usual more cozy, friendly location, but that's the way it is. There are members of the public who may be watching us on YouTube, which is good, and if they don't have already a copy of the agenda, they can get that by going on to oakville.ca, and they can pick up the agenda material that we all have. We have a couple of discussion items today and 2 information items, and we have some delegations too. We have 1 delegation registered, and if there's any member of the public in attendance today who wishes to delegate, they can make that known at the proper time. I'll ask the clerk if there are any regrets for today's meeting.
Mr. Chairman, regrets are received from Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. And I should just remind everybody that we are an advisory committee and that we make recommendations to council, and that our recommendations will go to council. Madam Clerk, can you remind me of that date?
Mr. Chairman, December 5th.
November the 5th. Sorry, December the 5th, I'm guessing. Okay. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to any of the items before us today? Seeing none, I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting. These minutes have been circulated. Russ, is that a motion to approve the minutes as circulated? Yes? Yes. So it's okay, we've got a motion. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the minutes are accepted as distributed. So our first discussion item today is item 4.1, which is a heritage permit application at 1475 Lakeshore Road East. And I think it's Carolyn who's on deck for that.
I don't think, oh, there we go. Thank you. I'll just wait for the presentation to pop up. So you'll all be familiar with this property. We did look at this at the last meeting. I'll just go through it again and, to give a bit of background on the property. It's 1475 Lakeshore Road East. And just showing in context, it's in Southeast Oakville. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see an overlay of the property showing the house and the creek that sits on the west side of the property and some of the landscaping around. So again, it's designated individually. It was designated in 1991 for the 19th century house known as the Barnett Griggs House, also known as the Halfway House because it was halfway between Hamilton and York, Toronto. In the previous committee meeting, there was a recommendation to remove the property from the CHL strategy, and that was approved by council. So this property, while it was looked at as a potential CHL, that's no longer the case. It's been identified as a property that should continue to be designated as a Part 4, but not for having any potential as a CHL. So the current application is to relocate the original circa 1828 portion of the Heritage House and to demolish the existing accessory buildings and later additions to the Heritage House. And then finally, on its new location within the site, to construct a new 2-story rear addition and a new 1-story screened-in porch addition on the west elevation. And a heritage impact assessment was submitted for this. This HIA assessed the property for its potential CHL. It also assessed the proposal to relocate the house and to make these changes to it. And the one other thing we've noted in the staff report, there is currently no development application associated with this property. However, the owners are looking at the potential for future possible severance to create new lots in the property. This is not what's being looked at today, and there is no recommendations related to any kind of development application. So really what we're focusing on today is the heritage permit application to relocate the house and to remove these later additions and add new additions. So just historic photos of the property. You can see in the top left-hand corner, this was the house before it was renovated in the 1920s. It was renovated significantly, not in terms of the built form, it remains similar, but the materials and details changed a little bit. It's still a stucco house, but the original semi-arched, 2/2 windows were replaced with the 6/6 windows with new shutters, and the whole front entranceway and doorway was changed with the neoclassical transom window and the side lights. So those are just some of the details that we still see today. And so this is what the property is designated for today for its heritage value. There's a view from the street. So again, quite far set back, lots of greenery and landscaping around. Originally, as we've noted in the report, this house was located on Lakeshore Road. Because it was a stagecoach house, it was located on the road and was moved back in the 20th century. So again, the view of the house from the front, this is to remain and to be restored. These are some other views, the elevation of the later additions that were put on. And one of the additions was put on in the 1920s. It's not included in the designation bylaw. The other additions were done in the 1970s and 90s, and there is also a detached garage. So none of these are considered to be of heritage value in accordance with the designation bylaw. So what we are looking at is the retention and restoration of the original 1828 inn. Just some more views of the property. And again, you can see more clearly the original portion of the building on the left-hand side and all of the additions and accessory buildings around it, which are to be removed. And this more clearly shows, this is from the Heritage Impact Assessment. Again, the yellow portion is what's being kept. So the site plan here is showing where the house would be relocated. Again, closer to Lakeshore Road, but still significantly set back from the road. And the proposal is to have a new two-ended driveway and a lengthened portion of that driveway to meet the garage at the rear of the house. You can see in the top right-hand corner, just a closer up view. So the gray portion is the existing heritage house, and the hatched lines show the two new additions. Here is the roof plan, which shows a little bit more clearly. The portion you see at the top, the long horizontal piece, that's the new addition. And the idea is to have a hallway in the center that connects those two portions. So that's that diamond shape that you see in the center, that roof line is connecting the new addition to the heritage house. And then you can see the sunroom on the left-hand side there. So again, here's what the house would look like from the front, the existing heritage house to remain and be restored, and the new addition to the back. You can see the enclosed sun porch there on the left-hand side with screens. And when we come around to the back, the proposal is to do a board and batten addition or cladding on the new addition. Fairly simple traditional lines, but they've pared it down to be a little bit more simplistic so that instead of copying the heritage details in the heritage house, it's a little bit more simple to allow the heritage house to remain the more dominant feature on the property and to distinguish the two of them. So again, the way it's been designed, this rear portion with the garage integrated has been separated so that they're really almost appearing in this way as two separate buildings. This is the view from the rear. This is the new addition. Again, board and batten. And then this is coming around to the west elevation, and you can see again that screened-in porch. And then you can see the rest of that addition to the rear, and again, a section of glazing where that internal hallway is, which connects the new addition to the old heritage house. On this elevation, you can note as well, and I should have noted here on the east elevation of the heritage house, there is one new window that's being proposed in the bottom left-hand corner to match the rest of the existing ones. I think this was existing at some stage, but was removed at some point. So it's being put in. And then on the west elevation, there are two new windows being installed to the left of the chimney, again, to match the existing style of the heritage house. So in terms of the heritage assessment, you actually have the heritage impact assessment, and staff has done their own assessment of this as well. And the relocation has been supported as it reestablishes the historic location of the house, and it reestablishes that connection to Lakeshore Road. It'll be more prominent. People will be able to visibly see the house more than you have in the last decades after it was relocated. The designated portion of the house, which is protected under the designation bylaw, is to be protected and restored. The new additions have been designed with traditional form and materials like the board and batten, but it's been detailed in a more contemporary way to distinguish the new from the old. And the additions, of course, are located to the side and the rear. So the heritage house will remain prominent on the site. In terms of approval requirements, and this is what you can see in the staff recommendation, we will be looking for a heritage easement agreement between the owner and the town to ensure that all the work is done properly. And this will include a relocation plan for how the house is to be relocated, a conservation plan for the restoration of the house. In this case, we've asked for some kind of commemoration. It is a really historically significant building, so we would like to see it commemorated in some way through something like a plaque, for example. A landscape plan, which is a standard requirement. And we've also included a salvage plan, so if there are any materials to be removed, that they could be used elsewhere. And as a standard requirement for our easement agreement, we always include financial securities that they would have to provide us to ensure that the work is done. And we would also like to update the designation bylaw because, of course, it is outdated, but also once the house is moved and altered in this way, we want to make sure that the designation bylaw is up to date. So the staff recommendation, which is quite lengthy, essentially says that the heritage permit application for the relocation of the house within the property, the demolition of the existing structures and wings, and the construction of the new additions be approved subject to the following. And the following are all related to the easement agreement. So again, this is for the relocation, rehabilitation, and restoration of the house. And we're just making sure it's executed in agreement with our executions bylaw and that we're able to discharge the easement agreement once the work has been done. Because again, this easement agreement is not for something to be in place in perpetuity. It's just to ensure the work is done. And when that has been completed, it would be removed from title, but we would still have the designation bylaw. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and we also have the agent for the owners here as well today.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. I guess the designation bylaw really only refers to the original 1828 house, so that's where our focus has to be.
That's
because
correct.
Of that.
That's
yeah.
correct.
And then the second thought that I had was it's being relocated to where it may originally have stood. So I don't know if any work has been done, the applicant could perhaps tell us that has located perhaps the original foundations. But I'm sure your salvage plan could be extended, if you like, to include anything that they might find from those original foundations that might be worth salvaging when they move the house or relocate it back closer to the Lakeshore Road.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I've made a note that through any salvage, that if there's any archaeological artifacts that are found or anything through that process, that we can deal with that at that time. And as well, any lakestone, because as you know, it was very likely built on a lakestone foundation. When it was moved, it was built into a concrete foundation, so we don't have any of that historic lakestone. So if it's all sitting there underground, it would be certainly helpful to have it.
Yeah, good, thank you. Any questions of Carolyn? Yes, Brenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. I just am curious about the commemoration plan in regard to some sort of plaque. Could that be readable from the sidewalk as somebody comes by so they don't have to try and peer up at the property?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Brenda, that's always our goal, is to make sure it's available, legible from the public realm, because we don't want people going onto private property. So that would absolutely be the goal, to have some kind of plaque. And there's also, part of that will also be ensuring that they have the proper plaque from the town, recognizing it as a heritage property. So absolutely, that will be considered.
Okay, Brenda? Yep. Any other questions of Carolyn? Nope, thank you, Carolyn. So somebody from the applicant wish to address the committee? So name, rank, and serial number for the clerk. You know the drill.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Terry Martino, Grenwise Architect and Associates. And we are the agents on behalf of the owner for the property at 1475. I'd just like to thank Carolyn for her presentation. I guess we, or at least some of the members of the committee, we had a pre-consultation I guess you can see that the revised elevations are reflective of some of the input and the comments at that time. I guess to address the one member's question, certainly through the landscape plan, I think there would be some form of piers or landscape feature at the street in the public realm at which we would undertake to have the official plaque put there. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, good. Any questions of the applicant? Later. Unless you wanted to direct them to him. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I just wanted to say that it's a lovely presentation, a lovely building, and you've done a fine job, all the right tools by integrating the new addition with a little ease and little pause between the old and the new. Very nicely done. I noted that the screen porch was moved forward as the building is approaching closer to Lakeshore Road towards its original location. And there's the option there that I don't think anyone would mind to integrate a solid base to that porch, because you are bringing it closer to the lakeshore. And as it is right now, I understand that it's just a screen porch, but at some point you may want to integrate it into a living space by creating maybe fenestration, glazing, etc., to give you some more options for the ground plane. And that would still be very much part of the whole heritage look. So because in the location that it is now, the screen porch makes sense in its tenuous form and its light form because it is set back in a forested area. But as you bring it closer, there would be no objection from my end to give it a little bit of heft at the base level and integrate it as part of the living space on the main floor.
I think we'd be agreeable to that, sir. Yes.
Good. Okay, any other questions of the applicant? No, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Darren. Okay, discussion confined to the board. Any comments from anybody? No? Just to remind everybody, because I know this gets confusing sometimes, what we have is a staff recommendation, which is in the report. It is not a motion. So what I'm going to ask now is if somebody would like to make a motion, which could be that the staff recommendation be adopted. Is that you, George? Are you prepared to make that motion? Thank you. Now that is on the floor. So the motion has been made that the staff recommendation be adopted, and the motion was made by George. So is there any discussion on that motion? Is there anyone opposed to that motion? No one is opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is 4.2. And this may be the meeting that's entitled sort of musical chairs, because everything is moving around, and we're dealing with another moving around in 4.2. And Carolyn, that's you again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's the relocation agenda. So 492 Lakeshore, this is a new property for the committee to be looking at. Probably many of you are familiar with it. It's located in southeast Oakville again at the corner of Park and Lakeshore Road East. So there's just showing the lot. The applicants are looking to sever the property. So again, you can see it's a rather large lot along Park Avenue and Lakeshore. So they're proposing to sever the lot and relocate the Heritage House, which is listed in the Oakville Heritage Register. It is not designated. It has been identified as a strong candidate by staff for designation. So this is a great opportunity to be able to protect the house through designation as part of this development application. So it is a circa 1926 arts and crafts style house known as the Sims House for the Sims family who lived there. And again, the proposal is to sever the property horizontally, west to east, so that there is a new lot on Lakeshore and a new lot set to the south, both facing onto Park Avenue. And as part of that, the house would have rehabilitation, including restoration and a new addition. And there would be a construction of a new house on the new lot to the south. And in terms of process, we're not looking at a site plan application. We're really dealing with this through a minor variance approval and for the heritage permit approval, which will come at a later stage. The minor variance approval, which we didn't get into detail in the application, or in the report rather, is because the minor variances are only required for the temporarily for the house. Once it's relocated and settled onto its new site, there are no minor variances associated with the house, and there are also none associated with the new house to the south. And the reason for this is just in terms of what zoning considers to be the frontage of the property. So once the house has been situated on its new lot closer to Lakeshore, it will meet the zoning requirements, as will the new house. Just showing a couple historic photos of the house. Again, a very unique house, this sort of 1.5 story but quite large roof with a shingle roof and cladding and lots of multi-paned windows really add to that character of the arts and crafts home, and the brick chimney. And luckily, most of these features are still there today, which is great. So we were able to restore all of those instead of replacing to match what was there previously. This aerial view shows the house a little bit more easily. You can see that there's the existing house, there's a pool to the rear, and a detached garage. The one portion of the detached garage does appear to be more historic. A lot of it has been altered over time and it's been added to. It's not been identified by staff or by the heritage consultant in the heritage impact assessment as having strong cultural heritage value. So the idea was to just focus on the designation and protection of the heritage house. So in terms of what's being proposed to the house, there is, of course, the relocation of it. As part of that, they are looking to remove a 1-story rear enclosed porch. This does not appear to be original, or at least was enclosed at a later time if it was originally just a stoop. So that is not considered to be of heritage value. There is also removal of 1 rear dormer, which was also a later addition, and again, the detached garage. And once it's moved, they're proposing a new 1.5-story addition to the back, and that is the highlighted yellows rectangle that you can see. And they're also looking to construct a new porch on the west elevation, since this will now face Park Avenue in terms of access for the street and for vehicular access for the garage. So that's, again, also highlighted in yellow. And as part of this, they are looking to reconstruct the existing front porch. The idea being that it's not considered safe to move with the house in terms of the relocation. So the idea would just to prop that up and to reconstruct matching or reusing as best as possible the heritage materials to make sure it appears as it does today. And again, the restoration of the exterior includes restoration of the windows, restoration of cladding where needed, but essentially to keep it as you see it today. So here are some views of the heritage house. Again, on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that that little addition there, the little enclosed porch, that would be removed, as well as that larger dormer that you can see. And on the top right-hand corner, the bottom window to the right, this is where that new porch entrance would be to provide access from Park Avenue. So this is the site plan showing how it would be located onto the new lot with the new house to the right. You can see the 2-story addition and the new porch. This is the house from Lakeshore, from the front elevation. Again, this is really as you see it today, just being restored. This would be the Park Avenue west elevation. And you can see the new porch with a bit more contemporary doorway. The idea was to keep it a little more simplified in terms of this new entranceway, so you can know that it's a later addition and it's not historic. To the right is the 1.5-story addition, which is to be clad in vertical wood siding to provide that distinction between the old and the new, but keeping a lot of the arts and crafts characteristics. The roof has been lowered a little bit from the existing house, so again, it's a little bit easier to see. It's more legible in terms of what's old and new. This is looking from the rear elevation. Again, the vertical siding showing that new garage addition. And looking from, I guess, what will be the rear elevation, I should say. This will be the new rear elevation, which is the east. And one other change you can see here in the Heritage House is there is a basement walkout that's been proposed. and you can see the new addition to the left. So here are some renderings. The idea would be to keep a lot of the same colors on the new addition, but again, the material provides that distinction. And here's the Heritage House, more from the corner of Park and Lakeshore, with the new house to the rear. And this is a view from what will be the new rear from the easterly elevation. And the basement walkout is visible on the right. So as part of this application, they are proposing a new house to the south. So again, this view here is a streetscape view along Park Avenue. So what you're looking at on the left is the Heritage House, which is the west elevation of the Heritage House with the new addition. The far right is an existing house, and the one in the middle would be proposed on the new lot. So same site plan, just showing in darker gray, this is the new house proposed, a 2-story house with a 1-story detached garage. They are proposing a brick house with a bit of a Tudor style in the front, and coming around to the rear, I believe it's we're covered in probably stucco at the back with some stone chimneys and stone detailing. So the top elevation is what would be next door to the Heritage Building. And this is the detached garage at the back of the property. Here are some renderings showing what they're proposing. Again, this is from the rear with the Heritage House to the right. Another view from the front. So in terms of what you're looking at today, there is no site plan required, but there will be those temporary minor variances for the Heritage House, and not for the final house of the Heritage House, and also not required for the new house, which also meets the zoning bylaw as it's proposed today. Similar to our last application, we will be looking for a heritage easement agreement between the owner and the town. This will include a relocation plan, conservation plan, landscape plan, salvage plan, if there's any materials to be salvaged. And as a standard, of course, financial securities will be required. And we would be looking at a new designation bylaw for this one as opposed to an amendment because it's currently just listed. So we're looking for support from the committee to enter into a heritage easement agreement between the town and the owner for the relocation and the designation of the house. We're also welcoming if there's comments from the Heritage Committee on the proposal of the house next door, which of course will not be designated heritage, but it will be adjacent to a heritage resource. So I'm happy to take those comments today as well. Happy to answer questions. Again, here's the staff recommendation. This is very similar to the staff recommendation in the last item you just reviewed. It's really, in this case, there's no heritage permit, so it's just related to the easement agreement itself. So I can answer questions, and we also have the agent for the owners here as well.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. As you say, it's only the existing house that's being approved today, both in its relocation and all of the other heritage requirements that it has for it. And that the new house that will be built next to it, that doesn't require heritage approval because this is not a district, and of course it's not yet designated, or it won't be designated.
Correct.
It's because it's adjacent to a soon-to-be designated Part 4 property that we have the invitation to comment. Now, I suspect there may be some comments on the new design. It might be more appropriate to save those for when the applicant is on the hot seat rather than you, because that's not your job to propose that today as part of the approval process. So having said that, if there are any questions of Carolyn with respect to the proposal that's encapsulated in the staff recommendation, which is the relocation of the house and the heritage easement and so on, are there any questions of Carolyn on that? Yes, thank you, Brenda.
Hi, Carolyn. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, pardon me. I have a question about the transition from a lakeshore frontage to Park Avenue frontage and the landscaping plan, because as it's drawn, it almost appears as if that lakeshore frontage is sort of orphaned. It doesn't have a walk to it. It doesn't have anything that actually connects it to the community.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Brenda. So I guess being that because it's changing frontage from a zoning perspective, you're concerned that there is no sort of walkway from the original front entrance towards Lakeshore? Is that it? Okay. That is a comment that can be made, and we can ask the applicant to speak to that as well, because that is something that we could look for in the landscape plan. Even recognizing, of course, that even though technically the zoning has changed the frontage, historically and architecturally and aesthetically, you know, that original front entrance still should have that presence on Lakeshore Road. So I think that's a fair point to make. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, good comment. Thank you. Any other questions or comments with respect to that aspect of the proposal today? George? It's the right side button on the pair.
Perfect, great.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? No? Yes? Good. Technology, wow. Just for my understanding, because I understand it's before us today because the property is listed. If it wasn't listed, we wouldn't be here, of course. But I find it interesting because in most of the other applications for delisting or for demolition have come to us, and people have either acted upon it and demolished the house or just left it. They didn't want to have it designated. But in this case, it's listed, so that means that it comes to us if they want to do something with it, as it is to turn it onto park. So, but there's no indication that. I guess you've explained it and I didn't properly understand it. There's no indication at this stage for designation. That'll come ultimately at the end.
Yes.
Even though the addition of a garage on the side would still, it may be difficult to describe the portion that's designated, unless I don't think you can designate a new part of the building, but that's, I mean, those are just questions that come to my mind as I was looking at this. But I think all we're looking for then is approval for the heritage easement agreement, okay? And as far as the building next door is concerned, if it hadn't been listed, he could do whatever he wanted with the property next door. If it's designated, then it would come back to us
Well, through you, Mr.
as
Chair,
an adjacent
George.
to a designated property, but it may be developed in the meantime, I suppose.
Yeah, the idea was to bring everything forward together, so
That's
you're
what
looking
I'm-
at all
yeah,
at once.
yeah.
So it is a bit confusing, you're right, there is no heritage permit associated with this because it's not technically designated. The heritage easement agreement is almost acting like that heritage permit. So
Right.
what you see today is what we're going to include in the heritage easement agreement in terms
okay.
of the new additions that we are supportive of. So that's why we wanted to get your feedback, because if there are any significant issues that the committee has with what's being proposed, now is the time to do it, so we can put that into the heritage easement agreement to make sure everyone's on board with what's happening. So specifically as it relates to the heritage building itself. So you won't see a heritage permit application on this unless the owners come back in 5 years after it's been designated and they want to make other alterations. But really the goal is to get support from the committee to protect the heritage building. Because you're right, it is just listed, so technically there's nothing triggering us to come to council for support, but we wanted to make sure that the committee was on board and had any comments on the overall proposal, which could include comments on the house that's being constructed to the south, because that is part of it. I mean, when we're looking at this kind of development, we want to make sure that it's the right kind of development. We want to make sure that the heritage resource is being protected. We want to make sure that what's being put in is appropriate for the neighborhood. So it's a bit confusing because it's not our standard process, so completely understand your questions. So we're just looking for any feedback on the overall proposal that we can incorporate on our end through the planning services processes.
Good, okay, well, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Carolyn. It's come up before, and it kind of bleeds into the previous application where there already is a designation, but we're expecting to update that as part of that process. In this case, this house is listed, and sort of its relocation on the property was deemed to be sufficiently significant that it would require approval to do that. Otherwise, they could have applied to have it delisted and if they had done that, then we might have said, this merits part 4, and we would then have proceeded to part 4. Is there any way, though, that the heritage easement agreement can include a reference to the intention to develop a designation bylaw with respect to this property, and that indeed is part of the conditions under which we are dealing with the proposal.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, we will include that. So the easement agreement will have a requirement to designate the property and will include what would be designated.
Yes.
So again, to George's point, we would not include the 1.5-story garage addition. That could come off in the future, but we would include details such as, the shingle cladding, the historic multi-pane wood windows. So all of that will be outlined in the easement agreement to ensure that when all of this work is done, the designation bylaw is in place, and the easement agreement will not come off. It'll be registered on title, and it will not come off title until the designation bylaw is in place. Right. So the easement agreement is almost a temporary designation bylaw, and once all that work is done, it will be removed, and the designation bylaw will be in place and in perpetuity.
That helps to clarify.
Yeah.
I think, George, that probably puts you back to where you wanted to be. That this is really a part 4, and we want it to be part 4, and get it there. And that brings us to the adjacent property, because it's adjacent to a part 4. In our minds, that's why comments are being invited at this stage. Okay, good. Everybody, George, again?
Just a quick, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, just a quick follow-up. In the meantime, the property, or at least the building on the property, remains listed until
the property will just remain listed and until the designation bylaw has passed.
Which will be provided for in the agreement.
What's that, sorry?
Which will be provided for in your heritage easement agreement.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
so it's protected in multiple ways.
Right, thank you.
Yes, the heritage easement agreement doesn't get discharged until the part 4 designation has been implemented, essentially, right? It'd be a continuous flow from A to B. Okay, Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow on Brenda's comment and to clarify, the address of the Arts and Crafts Heritage Home will be changed to Park Avenue, or will they retain the Lakeshore address?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Jerry, I think Craig can maybe answer this, but I would assume it would have to be a Park Avenue address. Perhaps we can open that up to the agent, but I believe, since from a zoning perspective, the Park Avenue will be the shorter lot line, so that would be the frontage. I'm not entirely sure if it's possible to keep a Lakeshore address, but it's something maybe Craig can respond to, or we can get back to the committee at a later date.
Thank you.
I think this happened to our property too, because the zoning changed to include this short frontage, long frontage, and to decide which then would be the front and which would be the side. So my house is Trafalgar Road, and it remains Trafalgar Road, although technically it's Sumner Avenue because of the frontage. So there's no need to change the address, and that's a pain to change the address. I mean, the post office gets involved. It's a pain to do that. So I would imagine they would keep it, and I don't think there's any requirement to change it. At least I've not been advised of one, and I'm in that situation. So perhaps the applicant could talk about that.
And if I might add, Mr. Chair, that I think it would be integral to the continuity of the heritage story of this lovely specimen of arts and crafts to keep the address on Lakeshore Road for heritage continuity. Thank you.
Right, okay, good. Okay, Caroline. I think, is it Mr. Esposti? Is that you, sir? If you're the appearing for the applicant, please give your name and so on to the clerk for the record. And
thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Craig Esposti. I'm with John Wilmot Architect, and we're the agents for the owners of the property. I don't really have a whole lot to add to Carolyn's presentation. I'm happy to answer questions, but just the two questions that were raised about the connection, I guess, between the building and the frontage onto Lakeshore, and about the address. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure about the address. I believe you're correct that it will retain the address of Lakeshore Road, so unless something comes up, but it's a zoning, it's really a zoning designation that's creating the condition for the change to park being the frontage. So I do think the street address will stay the same, but from a zoning review, they're going to consider the Park Avenue side of the property to be the front yard of the property. So that's for that. And then just the question about a walkway. Yes, there will be some sort of a connection probably to the sidewalk. There is one there now, and that would likely be developed through the landscape plan. We just haven't got to that point yet, but you're right. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Brenda?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious about the setbacks. I noticed that with the relocation and then the proposal for the new home, when I'm looking at page 167 of the diagrams, if I'm imagining looking down the road, I'll see the new home jutting a fair bit forward from the heritage home. And I'm wondering, is that intentional, or is there something that, I just worry about how does that affect the sightline of the home itself, the heritage home?
There's a couple of reasons, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. There's a couple of reasons for the orientation. One is just the lot is slightly irregular. You can kind of see the properties are kind of running parallel to, or the dwellings are running parallel to the side lot lines, which are somewhat angled relative to the street, and that carries down the street as well. So we're sort of following the similar pattern on that side of Park. And the other factor that we're trying to work with the Heritage House property specifically is there's a fairly mature tree right on the corner of Park and Lakeshore, which we're also trying to, wants to be retained. So part of that has us pushing the Heritage House on that property a little further to the east to do that. After that, it's a balance of trying to maintain larger rear yards for amenity space, that sort of thing, and you can see, I'm not sure I'm looking at a site plan that I have that maybe shows even the property to the south, which is also it's even further forward. So again, it's kind of following that pattern down the street. So all of those things have kind of played into the siting of the dwellings on the lot.
Okay, Brandon, thank you. There may be comments on the new house. And Carolyn, perhaps you can help me here. Is it better to invite those comments in the form of perhaps somewhat of a Q&A with the applicant's representative, or is it better to have asked our questions of the matter before us and then deal with comments when we're confined to the board?
Through you, Mr. Chair, whatever works. Any comments that have come out so far, I'm already taking notes. So if they come as FAQs or sorry, questions back and forth or comments, that's fine. I can make note.
Okay, so perhaps there might be some comments that might be directed to you, sir. And if that's the case, does anyone wish to make any comment? Yeah, Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say that the work done on the heritage home is lovely and nicely done. It's a beautiful example of arts and crafts, and I think you've done a lovely job to retain it and to enhance it, and actually pushing it closer to the corner means that we get to see it a little bit more visibly from Lakeshore as we're driving by or walking by. And, the landscape element of addressing the front entrance from a pedestrian perspective is also an important one that has been discussed, and I'm happy to note that it will be considered. I just wanted to say, in terms of the impact of the house, the contemporary home set within the Heritage Park Avenue landscape, and I'm looking at particularly page 166 of our package, and it is the streetscape. And nestled between the two, what I would identify as an Oakville vernacular format with a very asymmetrical play of roofs, I see a very a symmetrical, rather imposing rendition of a home. And I think that what tends to happen is there's an optical illusion of two tower forms that dominate the front facade. I think that is not in keeping with the character and the atmosphere of the Park Avenue area. And so, you know, it doesn't speak of the vernacular that we experience on Park Avenue. So, and I understand that there's, you know, the contrast with contemporary modern architecture versus the arts and crafts to distinguish. But I think that particularly evident, and Brenda brought this up in terms of the visibility from Lakeshore Road, does the new addition create an imposing element, a wall as such? And in the render addition, which is page 178 of our report, you can actually see the prominence of the tower form on the front view of this building. And so there are, you know, tools available that are, you know, not too complicated in terms of keeping the plan as is, but just a manipulation of the roof format. Of course, the rear is, you know, completely contemporary and modern, but the front, if there could be some massaging of that contemporary clean form, some elements could be hipping the roof rather than creating the gable verticality that creates that imposing form, potentially bringing down the roof a little bit so it integrates more in height with the two buildings adjacent to it, the two existing buildings. Hipping the roof, maybe extending the eaves on the front facades so that there is an integration of forms between the arts and crafts roofs that play and the other adjacent homes so that you have this play of roofs rather than this wall that becomes the gable part on the front facade. And again, this can be done without changing anything on the interior plans, just by manipulating the roof forms on the exterior of the building. So that, you know, we can retain the flavor of Parkdale, the continuity of the community. Because Oakville, in that area, Oakville was never an opulent community in terms of the wealth of Oakville was a very subtle wealth. So there was always, and that's why we designate, or we call it, we've nicknamed it the Oakville vernacular. There's a play of asymmetry of forms that play with the height so that even though the plan can be large, it never looks imposing from the exterior.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. George?
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I'm just commenting because, or agreeing with Jerry, because you're looking for comments, and she said it much better than I could ever possibly say it. And in addition, it just seems, from the renderings at least, it just seems to be a very stark-looking building that juts up out of the ground between the two, and it's, I agree completely. You're looking for comments, so I agree completely with Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, sorry, I just noticed, certainly on the front elevation, though it does exist on the rear elevation as well, the metal portion under the dormer just seems to really grab your eye and stand out, and to my mind anyway, not necessarily in a positive way. I'm not sure what the rationale was to go with a metal portion on that part of the roof. That's my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kai. Yes, that's on the old house. You can see that little bit of standing seam under the dormer window on the garage.
Oh, the pan roof, the
it's
shallow.
That's on the old house. We have a shed dormer there above the garage doors, and there's a standing seam
Yeah.
looking
and-
like there.
Sorry, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's just it's just because of the shallow slope, so we put a metal pan in to create, or to allow for that detail to drain properly. We could look at adjusting the slope
Yeah,
if it's possible to do it with a cedar shake, but you know,
Yeah.
you start getting into a shallow roof slope and it may not.
Yeah, it kind of pops out, and I know you're dealing with cedar shingle, so it's hard, but
Yeah.
maybe some other treatment in there would be more appropriate. We'll leave that with staff to finish off the final materials.
Sure, we can
But
certainly
that's a
look.
comment that Carolyn has heard from us.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thanks, Carrie. Right, any other questions and comments? No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is kind of the two-part thing again. What we're dealing with, what's in front of us, is we have a staff recommendation that we recommend to council 1, 2, and 3, which is all with respect to the relocation of the existing house. So that's our recommendation. And that would be the motion that we would put onto the table here. The second part of what we're doing is we're giving comments back to staff with respect to the second house. So we're multitasking here, which is very efficient and good to see. So if we deal with the motion first, if I could have that, if somebody would give me a motion to approve. Thank you, Councillor Giddings. We've got a motion to approve the staff recommendation. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Is there anyone opposed to that motion? No, thank you. That motion is carried. There've been a lot of comments have been made going on. Is there anyone would like to say anything else with respect to the proposed new home on Park Avenue? I think I've heard that it does seem big, high, not quite in keeping, doesn't blend. It could do without changing the need for the accommodation inside. We could do that extra on the exterior, which I think is what Jerry said, and she's now going to add to that and say it better than me. Off you go, Jerry.
Just one more item. I would say that the integration of color is an important element for the visual presentation of the new form, and I would say that the color should blend with the Park Avenue aesthetic. And if it's, right now as we see it in the white and black, it's a bit too much of a contrast and too modern in its form to integrate nicely and to settle into the community. So color is very important, I would say, I would add. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good, thanks, Jerry. So that's lots of comments. So there's no other comments? Super, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Right, we are now into number 5, which is information items. Now, 5.1 is the 2023 meeting schedule. And then 5.2 is the update on the Heritage Conservation District update. But at 5.1, if I could just pause here, this is really of interest to those who want to come back to serve on the committee. And there is a process underway to make that happen. And I think, Madam Clerk, you had some comments that you wanted to give us under information items with respect to that process.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder to the members to please reapply should you wish to. And the applications, the deadline has been extended to December 16th. And staff hope to report to council on the committee applications for January 30th. We previously sent a link to the members, and I will send a follow-up email to you with the link to the application site online.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. I understand from a number of you that your efforts to do that through the town website or through the earlier link met with some difficulty. And in fact, one of our members had to actually come and physically fill out the form in front of the clerk to make sure that it actually happened. So if you want to come back, persevere. Call Jill, you have a number, and she will help to sort out anything. Now, I did ask the question that we are told, and it says that there are term limits. And speaking as one who's blown through about 27 of them, I think, we're nevertheless invited, if we're still willing to donate our time, to give our time to this very important process. Forget that, just put your name in. because council, as we are told, it can waive that. It's a discretionary term limit. It's not built in to any bylaw anywhere. So please don't be deterred by the fact that you've been on the committee for a number of years. Your experience and contribution are valuable. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
On that point, then, the policy procedure is for a member to serve 2 consecutive terms and beyond that upon council's consideration.
That's right, which unfortunately would preclude most of the people looking at you right now. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want to lose this group, and council will I'm sure, take that into account. Okay, so 5.2 then is the Heritage Conservation District Plan update, and I think Kirk is going to give that to us. Thank you.
Great. So Sue is out of office today, so I'll be giving the update to you. It's lovely to see everybody. In support of our Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District update to the plan, I will be hosting a public information meeting on the 6th of December, and that will be held at Lusk Hall in St. John's United Church, which is at 262 Randall Street. The meeting times are from 6:30 till 8, and the program is a presentation with a Q&A session from 6:45 to 7:15, and then there will be a meet and greet on the floor with consultants and staff and participants to discuss some panels and get progress on the study to date.
So
That's the update.
that's progress, Kirk. I mean, this isn't finished yet. This is just to give people an update as to where we're at.
That's correct.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Right, these are, sorry, okay. Councillor Giddings.
While we have Mr. Bigger with us, I know it's not on the agenda. Next Monday, staff will be providing an update to council on Bill 23.
That's correct, Councillor.
And as it was confirmed at the legislature yesterday, could we include the Heritage Committee on the report that will come out? I take it there'll be some coverage of heritage in that report to council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct. We're covering the Bill 23 changes, including those proposed or now in effect for the Ontario Heritage Act. So that'll be the subject of the meeting and the report on the 5th in the evening, and we'll also be reviewing some of that material as part of our presentation to the public information meeting on the 6th as part of our update to the study.
Good stuff.
We'll be touching on that, and I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion and questions around it as well.
Indeed. Thank you.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, so that's the report going to council, and I think what you're asking is, and I'm glad to hear that we be included in that. Could we, our next meeting is December the 13th, which is a week later. Would it be possible, whoever does these things, strangely it's not the chair, to put that on the agenda for our next meeting so that we actually get that report circulated to us as part of our agenda package, and perhaps with some comment from staff, if we could do that? Kirk, would that be okay?
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly we'd be more than happy to do so for a committee. I think that's an evolving dynamic situation in terms of the implications of the changes. So there'll be a series of reports and information being provided, and we'll certainly include the committee in those communications.
Yes, well, I sense from everything I'm hearing there is significant pushback building up on a number of the elements of that bill. So I think it would be good for us to have that on our agenda on December the 13th, if that would be possible. Okay. Brenda, was your question a different one?
It was in parallel, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I was just wondering if we could just get an email with the dates of the meeting at St. John's United Church and the other, and then we can just put them into our calendars if we want to participate.
I thought we got that.
Did we did that?
Sue
I didn't see
circulated
it.
that invitation,
Oh,
I
okay.
think.
Pardon me.
At least I certainly was aware the meeting was happening, and I could only have got it from
didn't see
Sue. So if that could happen, probably Carolyn, just get that email resent to everybody to remind them of the meeting at St. John's Church on the 6th of December at 6:30 p.m. Okay? Okay, good, good, super, thank you. Can I have a motion to receive the information items, please? I think Sue was keen to do that. So we have a motion. Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, we've received the information items. Sue? Right, so our next meeting is December the 13th, and it says Oakville and Trafalgar rooms, but stay tuned, watch out for late changes, which caught, I'm sure, more than one of us today. It's also the date when we are planning to have our Christmas lunch again. I think it's okay to do that now. It's been such a long time since we've done it. I think we're ready to venture forth at the Queen's Head. And they don't open till noon now, so there may be a gap between the end of this meeting and the start of the festivities, but I hope to see you all there. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Jerry, thank you. No one's opposed to that motion. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, again, for the gift of your time today.